Up next, we're going to have the CEO of Children's Rights Alliance, Miss Tanya Ward, and she's going to discuss the Many Voices document with us a little bit further. So you're very welcome, Tanya. Good afternoon now.
How are you, James and Timmy? Great to be here. I'm so sorry I'm not there in person in Cork, but hopefully I'll get down there soon when all this madness is over.
I know. There's nothing like a in-person event, but look, we'll make do what we have, and it's going well so far. So thank God. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are first and the work you're doing?
So look, I'm the CEO of the Children's Rights Alliance, and funny enough, I'm in my job about 9 years now. I got reminded by someone on the board yesterday, and in a positive way, I think. But it's a great honour, to be honest, to be CEO of the Children's Rights Alliance, because it's an umbrella group and it has 100 plus member organisations, and Let's Grow Together is one of those organisations, and it's our job to campaign to make Ireland one of the best places in the world to be a child, and we know that one of the critical ways that you can make Ireland one of the best places in the world to be a child is having programmes like Let's Grow Together in the local communities and in rural areas as well. So really delighted to be taking part in today's event. And to be honest, it doesn't surprise me that the Taoiseach wants to get involved in today's event, because there's such a great reputation for this programme. I can see why he'd want to be part of it, but I think it's really smart to have the Taoiseach involved, because you actually need your senior politicians to actually notice what you're doing and to really champion the kind of work that you're doing. So well done on pulling that off.
It was a great coup to have the Taoiseach involved, but as I said earlier on, not surprised because he is a champion for young people, so it was great to have him involved. Can I ask you a question just around how do you balance the rights of the child with the culture he may come from? I know like sometimes if you're from a culture that's not of the mainstream, there might be the emphasis on school that there would be in mainstream. So is that an issue that might crop up for you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's funny around what children's rights means, I mean, essentially what children's rights, they're effectively special rules that tell us how children should be treated, mostly by the state, but also by their parents as well. So, children have a right to survival and development, and the work of Let's Grow Together is, it's instrumental in providing that for children. Children have a voice, and that voice should be heard. And not only should it be heard, we should be acting on it as well. Children should be treated without discrimination. These are all just really important reminders. And the truth is, one of the things I often really see is that parents are actually the main advocates for their children. There's not this conflict between the rights of the child and the parent. Like, we have a helpline, and the majority of people ringing us is actually the parent or their aunt or their uncle. It's a grandparent who are basically saying something is happening to my child and I need help. I think one of the big things that we see in throughout Ireland is some of those rights aren't being respected, and particularly in the area of education and early years education. It's a real shame that programs like Let's Grow Together are not happening throughout the country, to be honest. There's some regions of the country that are really lucky to have these programs, but others aren't. And one of the previous speakers was saying we need to make these things national, and that's absolutely the key, because we know that what happens in early childhood really matters. And one of the things that, really upsets me actually is when I see the studies coming through. There's one big one that was done, international one that was done, that showed that you could predict whether a child went to university based on their social and emotional skills at the age of 3. I mean, that's pretty shocking. It's kind of showing inequality gets locked in early on. And if we're not investing in programs nationally and locally at that age, then you are basically locking in children into intergenerational inequality. And it's not inevitable. Poverty isn't inevitable. And we should never accept it.
I think there's much more awareness around the importance of ensuring that kids get all these healthy engagements as young children, because there are studies now showing that kids that don't get these healthy relationships as babies and young infants, that a lot of them do turn into different addictions, and I go down the road as myself and James did, so I think it's critical that we start acting a little bit more, Tanya, in towards what you're doing, what the Catherine and the lads are doing. So I just want to thank you and say fair play. Your work is fantastic.
Thanks. And you know, there's one thing I did want to say. Earlier in the week, the ESRI published a report that was commissioned by the Department of Children, and it was looking at poverty and what causes poverty. And one of the things that just jumped out of the report was like, they talked about self-concept, and it was like 30 for children that are exposed to a lot of economic vulnerability. It was something like 31% of 9-year-olds had a poor self-concept. So that means they had poor view of themselves, what was achievable in their lives, what could happen in their education. And it's through those kind of programs, you know, the great professionals out there that change children's lives. Like, you always remember the sting of the teacher or the youth worker who told you anything, who told you nothing was possible, and then the one who told you everything was possible. And that's why I think these programs are just critical and opening up the horizons for children. I know I'm here to launch this report, and just to say something that really struck me and I thought was brilliant about it. We talked about, you know, the voice of children being integral around children's rights, and what's key about this report is that's what they did. I mean, they talked to children at the local community, they talked to parents, to families, to stakeholders, and what you see from the children that participated in it was they had a really good sense of what actually mattered to babies. They knew what mattered. They knew what was important from a health and safety point of view. There was a great photo of a baby and a fire saying, the fire is not good, but the play mat is good. That traffic, you know, fast cars are dangerous for babies. That families need houses, families need parks, etc. I mean, it's all the stuff you would see. You would see like public policy people talking about, but the children in the community actually know what their communities need, and we need to, I suppose, listen to what children and families are saying in their communities, and we need to act on it. We need to make it happen. So that'll be my message. But just to congratulate everyone and let's grow together. You've done a fantastic job in bringing this work together, and you've done a fantastic job today. And I hope you get the resources and the funding to really grow the initiative and grow the reach of the programme in the Cork area.
And that's a beautiful document as well, with some lovely illustrations by the children, you know. I have a question here from the audience, Tanya. Does Tanya think social media and freedom of access to the internet has a negative impact on the lives of children today?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, because the interesting thing that we know is that most children are online, and actually children in Ireland are more online. People in Ireland are more online than in other countries, and that would make sense because we're kind of pretty global ourselves in Ireland. You know, we're a small country. We need to reach out, and more often than not, it's like really incredibly important for children, just from an educational standpoint, for forming relationships, to reaching out in terms of their horizons. But one of the things we know is it's actually quite harmful sometimes for very young children to be on devices and things like that. And we need to get that education out there that actually it can interfere in their motor skills. Not that you shouldn't be educating children about the online worlds, because the younger you start, the better. You need to tool them up early on because they need to get the best out of it. And unfortunately, we haven't done enough to make the online world safer for children. That's our fault. We as a nation and we globally did not do enough to make the online world safer. So we're going to have to do our job to make it a much safer place for children and young people. But I think there's a real role for us to be educating children to get the best out of the online world, and managing as well, you know, what's possible. Sometimes children can go on to have Instagram accounts and things, and sometimes they can overshare, because you do that as a child, you know, and you do it through your teenage years. But the other thing is children are all different as well. You know, there was a big study done in the UK where Sonia Livingston talked to children as young as 10 and as old as 17 and young people. And she met like an 11-year-old who was really wily and was talking about Trump and his exploitation of data on the internet. And then she met a 16-year-old that was, you know, oversharing images and information about ourselves. And I think one of the things we need to recognize is, and parents will know this, every child is different. And you need to, you know, some children need a bit more help in trying to navigate the online world, and some children don't. And that's something I think we need to recognize as well.
Yeah. Do you know, if let's say like Let's Grow Together is built on the success of Young Knocknaheeny, and it's going to, you know, a benefit of more families. So this is something that, you know, categorically works and is evidence-based, and there's a great research behind it and ongoing to linking research to practice. In an ideal world, if you were minister or on Taoiseach or whatever, would there be a similar service in every community available to every family in Ireland?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd love to see a national plan, like a mapping of what we have already in the country, because we've lots of programs, and you can imagine other programs probably learning, the good practice that is happening in organisations like Let's Grow Together. But I'd love to see a national plan where we're getting to all the children and young people and the families that actually need programs like this. I mean, one of the things about the child poverty statistics is half of all children in poverty are actually in rural Ireland. When we think that they're in urban centres, and we know that they are, and those families that are struggling, it's with like housing costs, it's often low pay. All these things are really affecting families' ability to parent, and it's making life very stressful. So having these kind of programs is going to make a huge difference. And look, I'd love to see in a 10-year period, if the ESRI did another study, that you wouldn't see a stark stat saying 31% of 9-year-olds had a poor self-concept. I mean, it's unacceptable in our country that that's actually happening for our children. We should be seeing children believing that anything is possible and having a positive self-concept at the age of 9. That's what we should see happen. So we need to get behind, I think, we as advocates, politicians, government agencies need to get behind organisations Let's Grow Together and get the resources in there and get it rolled out nationally.
Yeah, you bring up a good point there around, varying levels of disadvantage. And in my old job with Cork ETB, we would have funded youth services, and a lot of the youth services traditionally was funded based on the deprivation index of the area. That was like a key indicator of they need a youth service. But in this day and age where you have very high rents, you have very precarious work, both parents are working, struggling to pay the mortgage, you have children in what look like very middle class areas, very affluent areas, with that in dire need of services that traditionally wouldn't be funded. So there is a case that, definitely in working class areas like where we're from, it's needed, but it's needed for everybody as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm from a working class area like yourself, and like we never had anything like Young Knocknaheeny or Let's Grow Together. And I saw children all around me that really could have benefited from those interventions. But you're right, what's actually happened now is, and it's particularly because of low pay, insecure work, and because of rent and housing, we actually need these services a lot more because families are really struggling. I mean, one of the things that I always say to people as well is, like, these families aren't captured in the child poverty statistics. We actually don't know how many families are experiencing this, but you get some sense from the homeless statistics, because you're seeing families for the first time in their lives presenting themselves to homeless services. They have jobs, some of them have actually jobs, and they just can't pay these crazy rents, 1,700 euros a month that's being demanded of them, like no one can pay. But the thing that is really worrying is, it does mean what people generally do is they don't put food on the table, or they scrimp at what they put on. Parents don't feed themselves is generally what actually happens, or they have to feed their kids poorer food, and that impacts children's just their growth. And like we have a lot of children experience obesity in Ireland, and that's a key factor. If parents don't have enough money to pay for good quality food, that's what you're going to see.
Yeah. No, well said. I could talk with you for hours, Tanya, and maybe I will on our podcast one of the days. But look, thanks for taking the time.
No problem.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Timmy and James, and well done to everyone in the program. You're doing an amazing job. Look forward to working with you in the future.
Thanks,
God
Tanya.
bless.